you work in marketing long enough, you certainly have some stories. Some horror stories, some success stories, and just some straight up weird stories. Today, our guest Moira Vetter talks us through her career in marketing and what led her up to winning her Lifetime Achievement Award at the AMA Marketing Awards. All that and more today on the Marketing Madmen podcast.
They say marketing is a madman's game. So now we turn it over to the Marketing Madmen with Nick Constantino and Trip Jobe.
Happy Saturday and welcome to the Marketing Madmen. Nick Constantino here, and we have a frequent contributor and now host of her own podcast on the Marketing Madmen Network, Mrs. Moira Vetter. Moira, how you doing?
Thank you so much. I'm great today.
Well, so we talked about this previously, but I was lucky enough to be in attendance when Moira won her Atlanta Marketer of the Year Award for Lifetime Achievement. And, that's the big one. There's no other way I said it. She had the speech planned for it, too. She got the longest time, no music with the hook to pull her off. That's how good she did with her speech. So I thought a good thing to talk about today would be things I've learned over my Lifetime Achievement Award-winning career. So we're going to go over a couple things. We're going to go through this. And what's most important to understand is that these are accumulation of knowledge over time. They probably change. There's things you probably learn and you revise later. So it's going to be fun to go through this. I'm going to put my 2 cents in where I can because God knows I can't do it. I can't do it without doing it. So let's hit it. So let's start with content.
Yep.
So very vague here. Content has changed a lot. It's cheaper to produce. I remember the days in the late 90s even when to edit a video, you needed $30,000 cameras and $20,000 computer equipment, specialized stuff. Now, the content people are putting out with just a phone is unbelievable. Yep. The attention span has changed, so now everyone wants the short bursts of content versus long form. So let's start with this. Let's start with the number one thing you've learned over that Lifetime Achievement Award-winning career. Talk about content.
Well, we all know that content is king, right? Everybody talks about it.
Content is king and sauce is boss.
Exactly,
I was taught that a long time ago.
Exactly. I don't know who's queen, but, I think that with content, everybody thinks they need it. Everyone's producing it. Like anything, everybody then becomes an expert. So, it becomes hard to really refine content. And, I think that most people think that generating content is about telling your story, right? Everybody talks about storytelling, right? We need a narrative and we need the story. But that assumes that you're supposed to be talking about yourself, right? It's like a bad relationship, right? You go on a date and all I do is talk about myself all night and I don't ask anything about the person. And so I think that from my whole career, yes, everybody needs more stuff, more stories, more content, more words, more pictures. But stop talking about yourself and all of it and start asking about your audience, talking about your audience. Tell her how great her dress looks. That's what's missing from most people's content. And that's universal. A lot of the things that we're going to talk about, and it's funny, like, what have you learned in all these years? A lot of the problems that everybody has today are the exact same problems people had 35 years ago. So,
I think the fundamentals of marketing hasn't changed in that period either. When I say fundamentals, the tactics and some of the things have changed, but the fundamentals have really not changed.
Yeah. One thing that's absolutely changed is everything has to be shorter, right?
Yeah.
There's attention spans have eroded, and people are, assaulted by information from all sides. So everything has to be shorter, but all these fundamentals are still things that, when you think about bringing up the next generation of marketers, they don't know all these things. They don't know things about how to make content riveting. And the way you do that is you bring the audience in and you talk about them, not you.
And I think it's even harder for this generation because they're a work-from-home generation. They're not as big of a social interaction generation. And the only way you can tell if your content works or not is the look on someone's face when you're saying it to them. Yeah. And if you're looking at someone and they're like that and you can't adjust, and you can't do that on the computer because you could always have that face on, or you can go off on a Zoom and be like, oh my God, this is all, you can do all that stuff. So I would say that as far as advice goes, I think that is fantastic advice for content, but if you're just starting, you're not there yet. Don't think about that. Just make it and get the reps. Get it out there. Learn how to edit yourself. Learn how to make because it's very hard to think about somebody else while you're making content the first time. You got to get in your rhythm. You got to get your cadence. The other thing I would say is something I found personally, it is okay to dumb it down.
Oh,
You
totally.
don't want to speak down to
No.
people because I confuse the two. I don't want to speak down to people, but when you get too technical, you lose people and you lose the mass audience. Content is not supposed to be, in most situations, for the niche. It's supposed to be a way to introduce yourself to everybody.
Right.
So if you start with a very high level, you're going to place out half the people that may be interested, but they won't be because you've already lost them.
Also, I think one way is to say dumb it down. Another thing is to break it into bite-sized pieces, right? Everybody's trying to tell too much to all the people in one vehicle or in one shot, and you need lots and lots and lots of little pieces of things talking to many different kinds of people.
And that helps you with your content too, because now you have multiple versions. If they like one, they're going to go back to the other, as opposed to that one flash in the pan. And again, that's the difference between long form content and short form content. There has to be different strategies. Ultimately, I've always been taught, use your short form to guide someone to long form, because while short form content is important, if there's no call to action or a mechanism for that to matter, then why are you doing it? So if it's to get to a website, that's one thing, a YouTube channel. So I think that's really good advice. Let's switch gears a little bit here. Kind of fits. You could have the best content in the world. What about user experience? Let's talk the Disney model. They have the best content in the world, but when Disney Plus started, if it didn't start with that user interface that is perfectly done, you're screwed. So talk about that user experience, that user interface.
I think that the challenge with all user experience, let's just keep it on screens for the moment. So user experience on screens. The challenge is all these large corporations got sold some piece of technology, and then they have to work in whatever box the technology gives them, right? And that is the enemy of your user. And it is the enemy of the person that has to, generate content and publish.
But a natural evil, because building that completely from the ground up, the time and investment, people don't understand how much time and investment is to build a real user interface from the ground up.
Exactly. Well, and you think about large organizations, right? Part of being recognized and being effective is being consistent. So there's absolutely aspects of how you manage a digital presence that these softwares and technologies are super useful for, but they don't always. They're built by technology people, not user experience people. And so, that's the thing. I think people kind of get on rinse and repeat, and they focus on, we got to put the pictures and the words in the containers, and they don't think, what's the person who doesn't know anything about this and hits this page or this screen? What do they think first? Oh, they can't read any of the type. Oh, the picture doesn't mean anything to them from where they are. And so you really do. It seems really simple. You talked about dumbing things down a minute ago. Just act like your mom is going to hit the page, right? There's a lot of it, right?
Yeah.
If we read a brief for 3 hours and then we designed it and we have to sit and explain to you for 30 minutes why it's working, it's not working, right? So I think a big part of being intuitive, it's that same thing, thinking like the user and not thinking like you, chopping things up and pushing them into boxes.
Yeah, and I think that when you talk about content is king, this makes sense, right? Because if you have really good content, then you don't need a lot of flash. You don't need a lot of substance. You don't need a lot of menus. The content is what drives it. And that's one real big difference. You don't have to do a lot of discovery on Disney Plus. Those are heritage brands that have been around forever. Just put them up there, make it easy to get to one, and make it easy to get from one to the next one. So it's easier. I'll tell you a funny story. I don't know if you knew this, but so Baseball Advanced Media is who owns all the rights for Major League Baseball. They were bought by Disney. And all the interface for Hulu and Disney Plus was based on what they made for Major League Baseball. And now Major League Baseball doesn't have its own streaming service, and their cable provider just went bankrupt.
Oh my
so
gosh.
it is a wicked thing. But for example, the Atlanta Braves, if I was to put a social media post with the Braves marks, it's a different contract than I have with the Braves to put on radio. So I'd have to go through Baseball Advanced Media, who is owned by Disney.
Well,
insane.
There's only 7 corporations that own the whole world. That's
true.
Let's be true.
The media
It all
world, for
rolls
sure.
up to a few.
The media, for sure. Well, again, those two flow together really, really, really well. And, content and UX. So these are things that you might not be able to do alone, okay? So let's talk about a client versus
I want to say one more thing
Please
about
do.
user experience. And so something that we end up talking about, because in our world, it's not all screens, right? It's not all digital, right? Especially if it's a long-term sales cycle or a complex proposition.
I mean, this office right here is user experience.
Right.
This exists for
exactly. That's the point. And so, I think that people think that UX is an exclusively interactive thing, and it isn't, right? You really have to think about, how does a person engage with this? And you think about all these retail environments that have been redesigned because of Apple. Let's just go Apple Store, right? totally different than any other environment, and it wakes you up when you come in.
Sure.
It's engaging. You can't keep your hands off that, right? They opened up the
but that's all based on data points. They're
Totally.
not shooting in the dark here. They know,
No,
just like
no.
Apple, when you open your iPhone, the way that Jobs did the packaging. Now, if you're a Chinese company on Amazon, you are packaging, you're putting money into packaging, which who would have ever thought that would happen?
Right.
That's user
Right.
experience.
Exactly. And so I just want to mention that UX is not exclusively a digital domain, and it's something that more people should really think about. What are all our touch points with
sure.
customers and audiences?
For sure.
Yep.
And, it's a good segue here, but one example comes to mind is proposals, RFPs, client-based
Yep.
proposals. I mean, if you're going out with a terrible proposal, that better have some good substance in there. You better
Right.
have world-breaking numbers. Otherwise, it really does matter. It's how it's organized. Did you start with the client's needs? The worst thing, I get a proposal and it's us. It's like, wait a second, how about me? Because you're
Yep.
pitching me, you want my money. Did you learn anything from me and this?
Yep.
So I think that's great. So let's talk about clients versus agency, because this is a good segue. So people who are managing your content and managing user experience, let's talk about the agencies involved and how that client-agency relationship works.
Yeah, and it probably shouldn't say client versus agency. That should be an ampersand.
I've seen it happen both ways.
Client and agency. The thing that's so interesting over my career with client and agency relationships are much of my career was in the high-tech space, manufacturing. And so you go back 20, 30 years, marketing is just, a sales support mechanism, right? It's very different than in CPG where research was there and CMOs were respected people, right? But in the B2B world, it wasn't really that way. And I've seen a huge shift over my career with marketers now truly bringing data into the mix, being understood to have value, to be at the table. And the other thing is, I've seen this whole thing of there was a traditional agency. There's an idea of what agencies are, right?
Yeah.
Madman, New York City, right?
Yeah.
All that. And agencies are there are so many different kinds of agencies.
Yeah, too many if you ask me, but I agree with that, yeah.
Exactly. And so the relationships have changed over all these years between how you plug an agency in, how it's organized to help.
When you plug it in, where you plug it in.
What the price point is.
Right.
To
Are you taking a
engage
commission? Is it up front? Are they billing you by hours? And I think that's a great point. We're going to hit that right after this break because I think that's a good starting point for the next one because, again, it defines how you built all these relationships and where all these points came from. So you're listening to the Marketing Madmen on Extra 106.3, and we'll be right back.
Now back to the Marketing Madmen on Extra 106.3 FM.
Welcome back to the Marketing Madmen. Nick Constantino here, and we are sitting with the guest host and now frequent contributor, Moira Vetter. And we are talking about, let's call it the 10 things she learned through her award-winning, Lifetime Achievement Award-winning career. And we just ended on clients and agency, not versus agency. Again, I've seen it both ways. But it's important to understand this relationship because where Moira fits in is different than a lot of the agencies that I deal with fit in. I have seen agencies now that exist to be your analytics agency and your artificial intelligence agency.
Yep.
And I bet you there are just Chat GPT AI agencies living right now, being boiled up, which is ironic because they used to be the ones coming up with the creative. Now they're plugging it into machine and calling themselves an AI agency, which I find fascinating. But again, an agency fulfills an obligation to which you can't staff yourself, or it's cheaper to do it, or it's so technical that you can't find the people to do it. So they serve a very strong purpose. So let's finish on that note. So talk a little bit about just what you've seen gone right, what you've seen gone wrong, and how much you've seen it change, and some of the newer agencies, types of agencies you're dealing with.
Yeah. So I think you brought up a great point, which is, Chat GPT or AI or whatever the latest, greatest technology, there will be agencies that form around that, right? Anytime there's an innovation, right? It's a new industry, new category, and people sort of introduce themselves. And there are some people that think of marketing as an experimentation, right? And so they want the newest, latest, greatest agencies because they're going to bring this experimentation in. But the other part that you brought up, I think a good, strong relationship is about complementing what you have. And one of the things that I've seen over my career is there is not a model that is only with agency and only without. Like I've seen a lot of ebbs and flows, right?
Yeah.
People go through, we have all this headcount, we don't need an agency. But there's this one skill that we can't find anybody that's good at it, and we're going to invest there. On the flip side of that, you have people that have no resources at all, and they offload all of it. I think the biggest benefit that agencies bring is we can be on the outside looking in. We can be arm's length from it. That third party thing is critical because you can get way too close to your subject matter and sort of lose sight of the customer. And so, I think most of the great relationships that I've had over my career have been with people that were very forthcoming about when they needed you, where they needed you, how they needed you. And if that changed, that was fine as long as you kind of had this relationship of trust. And so, years ago, there was a move for people to build in-house agencies. And a lot of companies have an agency on the inside. And it's, a better price point, or it's easier to engage them. And so they thought, we have built an agency on the inside. We don't need external agencies anymore. Well, some of our best customers are the in-house agency at the company. So it's all about long-term relationships and partnerships.
And I think it's so different for brands because one thing that is consistent throughout, if you took the time throughout your business cycle to build a strong brand, all of these things are easier, right? If you have a strong brand, it's much easier to have internal marketing because that brand stands out, right? What's really hard to do is go from 0 to 60, start advertising because you expect immediate results, and it just does not work that way because you may turn on a digital marketing funnel, you may get a ton of leads. That doesn't mean you've built a brand. It means you're capitalizing on bottom of the funnel activities, and those are very different things. So I think one of the things that I've come to learn, it is just a cycle of some businesses. We spent a long time pretending like strategy was the enemy. Like we need to be out there winging it. Like we're just going to figure it out. We're the best for clients. And what I've come to realize is half of these clients don't have a strategy. And once you start explaining your strategy, sometimes you hurt yourself more than you help yourself because you're not a mechanism to see their vision. You're starting to tell them what their vision should be. And sometimes that's a threat. But at the same time, without that strategy, how are you going to retain customers? How are you going to know life cycles if you're going that way? So I think that it brings up a good point. As far as that trusting relationship, knowing KPIs, knowing what deliverables are. If you're going into any kind of relationship and you don't know what the inputs and outputs are, you're being set up to fail. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would. And I think that you bring up a good point. Let's say you're a small business owner, right? And often you're like, well, we don't have enough leads, right? We don't have enough traffic. Maybe we need to try one of these agencies. And the problem is going for the shiny object, right? Oh, this new, maybe we need a chat GPT strategy. No, maybe you need to be doing all the fundamentals you haven't been doing for the last 20 years. So, I think. And planning
for it to take a year for it to start kicking in. Correct. Otherwise, you're just going to be that flash in the pan. Like, the worst one, the influencer marketing.
Right.
Great. Right. Yes, you will sell your good if you pay a Jenner $1 million. You'll sell that stuff. But then when the next one gets sold, you're forgotten about. You've built nothing. And now all of a sudden you probably have false hopes. You've cash flowed the wrong way because
you don't have the equity. The influencer has the equity. I mean, again, it's all these things where, you really do have to be careful about the strategies and form the right partnership and not around the flashy stuff. Make sure that there's some combination of substance and new things.
And a mix, a full funnel approach. So that's a good thing. We got on here, digital marketing. So my quick 2 cents on it, because this is important. This is one of those ones where you go through an initial stage of this is a new thing, everyone comes into the industry. Then you go through your consolidation. Then you go through your point where everyone is just trying to take advantage of the flashy object. Because there are still thousands of clients just in Atlanta that have no digital marketing strategy. Okay, so what do? You go there. Now all of a sudden, all the little guys are bought out. It's all big shops. There's no customer service whatsoever. They're applying the same principles to you as they are to 100 other people. Digital marketing works well in one of 2 scenarios. One is, again, if you have that brand built, right? I have a client, long-term jeweler, Solomon Brothers. Love the guy. But we had the ultimate conversation about, hey, I hired a digital agency. They're killing it for me. I go, do not be that dumb, please. They are killing it because you spent 30 years of you and your father's blood, sweat, and tears building a brand. They are capitalizing on what you've already succeeded. So if they are telling you that this digital marketing is what is capturing it, you are being lied to, and you're smarter than that. And look, it was hard words, but luckily I have that kind of relationship where I could. And that's the successful one. Or if your plan is to get a quick ROI and sell your business. Because if that's the case, who cares what brand you're building? So in those 2 scenarios, I could see where a point where someone just does digital marketing and nothing else even. But if you're talking about any sort of long-term business model, digital marketing is one mechanism of a bigger strategy. I would like to hear your thoughts on digital marketing because it is a big, bold number on here.
No, whether it's a funnel, I know we were talking about, there's the funnel, there's, the chasm, there's a quadrant or a forward, but there's always some mechanism somebody's using to describe this ecosystem of stuff and messages and touch points and engagements. The important thing is, I think it's exactly what you said. You can't just have this one piece of the mix and, this one makes us more money, therefore we're only going to do that, because there's a moment in time where people are engaging around that, but that's not every buyer. That's not everybody's awareness of your brand.
Right.
Not everybody is ready to buy every minute of every day. And so for me, and this is not exclusive to B2B, everybody ought to be thinking about what is it when people don't know about us, right? What is the first thing they learn? Okay, and what's hard about that? And then how do we move them to the next step? When they learn about what it is we do, when is it that's actually important to them? Solomon Brothers. Only when they're about to get engaged now, all of a sudden I care about jewelers, right? I'm a dude. I don't care about jewelry. But I'm getting engaged. Now all of a sudden I'm going to become an expert.
But that top of mind brand is what makes you think, because it's the same thing, the old roofer thing, right? Not everyone needs a new roof.
No.
But when you do need a new roof, you're going to call the guy who you remember to call, or you're going to Google it and take the first thing. But then the problem is you realize that all those reviews are now fake and they're put in there. The placement is not based on the SEO that it used to be the same way. So you are being, and conned is the wrong word because it's the mechanism that exists. But that's one of the problems I always see is like there's always a technology that can make somebody look better the more money they spend.
Exactly.
The barriers to entry are super high monetarily, but the tech to do this stuff, you pay an agency right away, they'll get you number one placement overnight, which is not how it was intended to be.
No, and there's too much focus to me on that sort of bottom of funnel conversion, right? It'll work for a moment in time, but there's too many other jobs that you need your marketing doing, your advertising doing that are about brand or about, forget getting people to buy. How about people that want to come work for you, right?
For sure.
That's,
it all plays together.
Yeah, there's all kinds, right?
Purpose-driven.
What do we mean in the community? Do people know about us? Yeah. Do people like us? All of those things suggest that long term that you're talking about, right? Playing the long game. So you can't just have...
Yeah. One of the things we did, and you joked about funnel and chasm and conduit, so many of our competitors just had a sales funnel for digital marketing, and I was like, you know what, screw this, I'm going to make my own funnel. And what I did was, so you always see top of funnel and you always see bottom of funnel. So I built my entire strategy for this company on the middle of the funnel. Okay, and one of the reasons is that one, we've been here for 30 years, so if anyone's going to drive consideration, it is going to be a company that they trust, that they listen to every day. So we have these talent endorsers, we have these community events. Those are things that I think drive the consideration factor. If you are about to go and you're about to commit to buying something expensive, if you go and play in a golf tournament and see the sponsor coming back to the community, it will influence you. Maybe it's it's 10% more, but look, they give money back. They'll probably do a better job. Or you have somebody, a trusted person that's talking about it. So that middle of the funnel was so often neglected by, and it wasn't just digital agencies, it was TV. TV, very hard to track where their consideration is. It's starting to get that top of funnel. I joke, if you talk about Mercedes-Benz, their digital advertising works. But you have been branded to buy a Mercedes since you were 5 years old. Right. It has been an aspirational purchase. They've been running commercials of just two good-looking people in a Mercedes driving through the most tropical locale. That is, so when eventually you're there to buy it, you remember those subliminal messaging. That seems to be forgotten. Everyone's just talking about that bottom of the funnel.
You want to talk about the long game. Why do you think that there are little cars for 2-year-olds that have Mercedes brand now, right? It used to just be, some little kid. Right now it's a Jeep, it's a whatever, it's a Mercedes.
Video games, they pay the licenses, but the cars eventually they're just like, no, you put it in. I'm not going to, you don't have to pay me. That's a
30-year, 40-year investment in a payoff. And you really need to do those things. I also think you bring up a really great point about middle of funnel, which is, one of the things that I think about. I wrote down scientific advertising now this is not for people that are not marketers, don't want to go read this book, but if you're interested in copywriting, you're interested in marketing, it's fascinating. So Claude C. Hopkins wrote this book, and it is about how you move people.
When was the book written?
1923.
Okay, that's why I want to know. That's a very the concept of scientific advertising was probably a lot different in the 23 than
100%, right? So it is very much about moving people over inertia, getting them to take action.
More psychology probably than technical.
It's absolutely the psychology of decision. If people that are interested in consumer insights and behavior.
So sociology too, because how the group acts together is important to marketing.
Totally, right.
Love it.
And so there's a lot in there, and that's where I do. Direct mail and direct response always gets this bad name, like it's people peddling things, but the whole point of it is we're not creating all these podcasts and all this content and all these blogs so people just read stuff.
No.
Right?
Call to action.
You want them to go do something,
yeah.
right? And so the whole point of middle funnel should not be just chilling with people who aren't ready to buy. It's how do I get somebody to go to the next point? Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. And I think good copywriters, and copywriting is another thing that gets a bad word, but everything is copywriting.
Yes.
Everything you do, your website, your blog, your posts, your social media posts, it's copywriting, because the enemy of copywriting is long-windedness, and also I think people try to get too creative and a little too whimsical, and you forget the call to action.
Well, you want to talk about too creative. This is pet peeve of my whole career, right? The people that say, oh, I love it, it's so clever. If it's too clever, somebody's losing what you're talking about. And, you think about all these tools people have to filter and Photoshop and create all this stuff. If you're talking to the wrong person and you put the wrong 4 words with that picture, I'm glad that you just spent 10 hours creating that picture, but you put 2 of the wrong words and nobody's going to get your message.
That's not that much different than when we talk user experience. Somebody who's got the flashiest website in the world. I've met people with the flashiest site in the world that have no substance to their business, and I have people that'll do $20 million siting companies that have the worst, crappiest website you've ever seen in your life. So, I think that is one of the hardest things. As marketers, we're trained to look for that. We see through the bullshit most of the times because we're the ones.
Right. Well, and that's something, as a marketer that especially in B2B, people don't have the kind of, budgets that these CPG companies have. Your videos are not full motion picture productions.
Right.
If you know what you do and it's of value and you understand that value proposition and you're talking to the right customer, you don't need a sexy website and you probably don't need an agency.
And I think that's the same thing with video. When you see a social media video of someone making an endorsement for a product, I trust it more when it looks like it's shot on their phone. Yep. Because when it's professionally produced and all this, are they endorsing it or are you paying them? And again, I'm fine with paying people. We built a business on paying people to speak on behalf of something, but we will not pay someone to speak on behalf of something in which they don't use and operate.
Correct.
And to be honest with you, Google got in a whole bunch of trouble a couple of months ago because they paid iHeart to do endorsements across the country for a product that hadn't even come out yet. And word got out and they both got sued because they were speaking on behalf of a product which was delayed in launch, and instead of saying, well, let's wait till it gets in their hands, they were reading all this feature list off of a product they couldn't even physically touch. And everybody got sued because it is, again, I knew the laws were there. I didn't know it would be such a public case, but those laws exist for a reason. I mean, Dick Clark, the way he used to just take money and put it in his pocket for reading something on the news or on his show. Those things are there. Those laws exist for a reason.
Some people don't know. I mean, there is truth in advertising. As an agency, there is a code of ethics that we have to adhere to.
Yeah.
If it ain't true, we're not supposed to be saying it. And, we have to try to validate things, right? If something's totally implausible, you cannot put it out there.
Now, that being said, digital agencies will share any kind of craziness in the world. You are speaking on behalf of a brand and strategy agency that has been around for a long time, that was fundamental principles from agencies before it. Very similar to what we do with the radio. If you saw what my public charter was and the things that we are obligated to do in a public charter, have you seen the internet? You can put anything in the world up with clickbait. It is so scandal-ridden, but they get away with it. So I think it's a really good point, and another reason why those old trusted brands are important. If you're trying to build a good long-term brand, speak with somebody who's going to tell you can't do that.
Right.
Because if someone's saying yes to everything, you're going to be in trouble, or you're going to rub people the wrong way.
Yeah, you don't want a yes man. You never want a yes man. People need to hear what is right to do. And even you mentioned the Emmy Awards we were at. Ken Bernhardt was one of the speakers. He was a Georgia State professor for 40 years, and he sits on the board of those Truth in Advertising. When people lie in their advertising, somebody brings a charge, and it goes to basically a mediation session with professionals, and people pay the price. I mean, there's penalties, there's issues.
Yeah, and look, like anything, there's ways around those things. You copyright the right words. It might not be true, but you copywritten it, so it's part of the brand. And I'm not going to name where that comes from because it was a previous episode, but So let's switch gears a little bit, and because we're talking about the funnel, let's talk about conversion. Let's talk about KPIs, dreaded words, only because everything should be a key performance index if it's driving to what you want, indicator for what you want. So like, you can't say KPI because every business's KPIs are different, right? Some people, engagement's important. Like as a radio property, what's more important, having people listen or having people listen for longer? Is it the right audience or this? So not every radio station is going to be the same. So while they are key performance indicators, they should be for you. You should not let someone else tell you what your KPIs are. If an agency comes to you and says, here are the KPIs we're doing, wait a second.
What?
No. I tell you what the keys are. You don't tell me what the keys are. So talk about conversion and talk about how people do it right and wrong and what a real conversion looks like and should look like.
Yeah. So you're 100% right that doing it right is defining it in terms of the actual business performance you need, right? What kind of engagement with what people, what's reasonable to expect from those people. You know, if you don't have a benchmark, create one and start from there, and get your own data. So nobody should come in and say, you should expect X. It's ridiculous, right? Because you know every sales cycle is different, every price point's different, everything's different. So, there are absolutely rules of thumb. Some of the basic rules of thumb are we don't want to pay 10 times more for the marketing or the advertising than it might get us. I mean, that's a universal piece of math you should do. What's this going to cost us?
But that being said, I'm going to throw this out there. If you had never marketed and you really want to turn on a funnel, there's a way on your initial upfront that you should be spending a lot more money if you're playing the long game.
Totally.
Because maybe it's just kicking everything in at the same time.
Yep.
Maybe you realize, the great example, if you advertise for 5 years and you stop, you will never know that the advertising starts until about 6-7 months in. But then at 8 months, you're going to have to double your spend to get back that time that you made up. So again, there's always... But you're right. Like, let's not go in and just spend all this money expecting to get less back because you're being tricked.
No, and I think that's a point that we make with clients is that there is an upfront investment, right? If you're launching something new to market or you're rebranding your company, you don't just turn it on day one and woohoo, we're a new company. It takes time for people to understand that, for it to proliferate, for the leads to come in, for somebody to talk to the
for everybody on the board to have a say in what color your logo should be.
No, don't do that. Don't do that.
I've seen
it. It's bad, and they shouldn't. Unless they're the buying audience demographic, right? That's something we talk about a lot. I don't care if you don't like it because you don't fit the profile of the buyer. But the other thing I will say on conversion, so we talked about doing it right, but the do it wrong is. One part of your organization thinks this is the KPI, so you structure a campaign, and the other part of the organization thinks something else is a KPI. And then you go to report on it, and then half the group thinks you're succeeding and half thinks you're failing because you don't understand the metrics, you don't understand what you should be expecting it to do.
Yeah.
And so we see that a lot, and I think everybody should watch Glengarry Glen Ross if you have not. But the whole always be closing.
I finished my coffee already.
Right. So, but the always be closing is a thing where I think that most people or some people in an organization think that the KPI for everything, it could be a new logo, right? The KPI should be a closed deal, right? A new logo, a new color palette, something that is trying to refresh. That's not going to do that, right? It's got a different job that it needs to do. And so this whole idea of delivering sales qualified leads from engagement tactics that are not about closing sales.
Probably because they're missing call to action. Let's call back to where we were.
Right.
If you want phone calls, you got to put the phone number in. Like, let's call it what it is.
Or again, let's talk about a small business owner, right? So we had a client who was promoting some things that target small business owners. And one of the things we talked about was these small business owners don't understand what you offer and how you buy it. And so they're running ad campaigns, driving traffic to a website, and the page that they land on is get a quote now. Well, if people don't know what to buy or how to buy or even what it is,
what's the point of the quote?
Don't go get quote now because first they need to understand. And so that is that is a very simplified example of some aspect of that's happening in your marketing right now. Somebody needs a lot more information to take some next step, and you're trying to get to the. But is Bob calling them? Have we got them on the line? Right?
And sometimes the clients need a push. So for us, one of the problems we deal with is they're like, well, this is going to be this campaign will be decided on leads. And it's like, well, wait a second. What if you get 5 leads and 5 of them convert? Wouldn't you rather that than 100 leads that 5 of them convert? So is it on leads or is it on conversions? Because those are different things. Our audience will convert at a higher clip than you will find on the internet. Why are you chasing leads? Leads occupy company time. Yep. They look low close rate, especially from the internet. You're vetting out the craziness of some people's what they're putting in there. So I think it's a good point of when you can push back a little and say, look, what is the goal? What is the KPI? We might be missing each other here. So I think that's a good point to leave it on the break. You are listening to the Marketing Madmen on Extra 106.3, and we will be right back.
Now back to the Marketing Madmen on Extra 106.3 FM.
Welcome back to the Marketing Madmen on Extra 106.3. We're sitting here with Moira Vetter. We are talking through 10 things she's learned in her award-winning career. If you like the podcast and you're enjoying the content, check us out, search for us. We got old episodes everywhere. Follow us on LinkedIn, engage with us. If you want to be a guest, send us a note. We're wrapping up season 2 now, and just the diversity of guests has been amazing. We want this to be real world, applicable, and diverse. So if you have an industry that you're in that you think people should hear about, let us know, drop us a line, follow us, engage, and like and subscribe to the podcast. So, Moira, we're finishing up on conversion. I think conversion is a great segue to salespeople, because where would we be on this funnel without salespeople? So one of the things I always goof around is my job is not to get your deals closed. My job is to get somebody to call you that is a qualified lead. You better have some closers that are answering those phone calls, because, what if they answer? So we have found the most companies that we do the best with are ones where the salespeople are also listeners and understand how to talk brave. So, for example, garage door company, big garage door company. His people come to games. We meet with them. I've sat and trained them on the messaging. So when they go out to a sales call and they know it's a 6A the fan sales call, you wear a Braves hat. You talk Braves a little bit. Right. Think of do you think somebody is going to care about a $300 difference delta in a thing if you're talking for them for half an hour about baseball and it's not all of a sudden a hard close?
Right.
So where salespeople come into this is strategic. And we've talked about, Joanne mentioned it, you mentioned it, how important the role of the CMO interacting or the agency interacting with salespeople is. I don't think it can be understated. Yep. And I think we succeed almost every single time when those salespeople are involved in the process.
Yep, completely. So, one of the things, we do a lot of professional development for all the people in our agency, and particularly the account service people, because they're the ones that talk to the client, understand the marketing challenge. They're the ones that are lining up these interviews and making sure that the salespeople are present. And so one of the things that we recently did was we had a whole professional development session on sales and salespeople, sales methodologies, right? What is it about the job of a sales guy that is so hard, right? Or sales gal, whatever. And so, one of our premises is if you don't know what goes into being a salesperson, you're not going to be a very effective marketer, because you don't know what stops them, what's hard to overcome.
Objections,
right?
my
Objection
goodness.
handling.
And let's be clear on one thing, okay? When ish hits the fan, they fire the marketers, not the salespeople. And
Correct.
The reason is because the salespeople have revenue directly tied to them, and they are revenue
Correct.
creators. And it doesn't matter if you are the best marketing company in the world.
Yep.
There is always a point where you are looked at a money spender, not a money maker. And
Correct.
I hate it. It's not
Yep.
the right way.
Yep.
So one of the things, and again, I think the salespeople need the marketers,
Yep.
but organizations do not thrive without salespeople. It will never change. When we have ChatGPT running every commercial, when we have programmatic ads running on everything, you still need salespeople.
Yep.
And it is an important thing to delineate. And this has come from me as running the sales department, and marketing is kind of my side passion. But I just think it's important to say, because everyone thinks that their job is the most essential. But if the salespeople cannot sell and understand the messaging of what you're going out with, you have no real connection to the consumers who are buying your goods.
Correct. And that's where I think that, some of the best campaigns of my whole career came from true collaborations between sales, engineering, and marketing, because we understood why things were as great as they were. We understood what the people heard on the front line from the customers and saw what the success looked like. And then you bring that into marketing, and it's something real. The other thing is, if you have an organization where sales and marketing is cats and dogs, and you're set up as enemies of one another, it's sad, right? Shouldn't exist anymore. But you really have to understand that marketing is facilitating this long-term process, and the marketing, the sort of the adoption curve should map to the sales process, right? Somebody ought to know, here's how buyers buy. Here's how we sell because it actually aligns with how buyers buy. And here's how marketing works to help that buyer along that curve. And then when they come into our world and they're connecting with a salesperson, here's how marketing continues all the way along the curve. And so it is about alignment. So if you don't know what they do, you don't know what they know, you don't know what they need, you can't possibly align a marketing program with those salespeople. So if you're in an organization, you're in sales, and you've never talked to the marketing people, go find out who the marketing people are and say we need to change things.
And not just the sales manager, because the sales manager's job is to be the conduit, right? And that's what I found out. One of the hardest things in my job is being the facilitator between those departments and interpreting and passing it along. Okay, that doesn't mean it's directly what's going on. So talk to the ground salespeople, and not your most tenured, because the most tenured are the most jaded. Grab the young stud, guy or girl that's out there in the streets and having the most success, and say, what is it like out there for you? Because those conversations absolutely need to happen, because ultimately, as a marketer, you want more funds to go and market. And if you have a good sales process, you will make more money for the company to go out and market. It's a simple numbers game.
100%.
So and I love this. I love that conversation. I just really think that of all the things that people have learned and all the marketers I talk to, so few talk about that. And that means they're not in the ground level of what's going on. This applies to every corporation there is. If IBM, their salespeople don't know the cloud services and how they're being marketed, how are they going after the right people? How do they know what to speak about in the meetings?
And it's not all old school, like field sales guy riding around in a car for 5 hours, right?
Something.
It's inside
Everybody
sales.
is selling something.
Sales support on a call where somebody comes in and then they get upsold and they go over, or somebody that is a lot of, these days, a lot of it is an online demo, and you've got somebody, walking you through something. That's all sales, right? Those are the people connecting and getting people to convert.
Yeah. So we got about 5 more minutes left. So let's do a quick blurb on B2B, and then I want to end with acronyms because it is one of those funny ones that annoys everybody and it changes every day.
So funny enough, B2B is
there it is.
A 3-letter acronym, TLA. So nobody cares about B2B but me. I've done B2B my whole career. It is the redheaded stepchild. It still generates 2/3 of all economic.
In theory, everything we do is
engine.
B2B. Everything we do is
Everything.
B2B. I'm looking for advertisers who are businesses to spend with a business. So in theory, what I do is B2B, and I agree. It is underlooked, but I think that's changing also.
Yeah, it is. And so, what I have seen, again, over this sort of career arc is consumer marketers have come into B2B and woken it up. Data and data scientists have come into B2B, and although you may have a smaller sample size because you're dealing with more niche audiences, the more data you have, the more you can support the fact that, there's only 10 of them, but it's a $3 million sale. So we are actually going to invest $300,000 each, or whatever it is.
Sure.
You've got the data, but I think B2B people are business people, right? That's really, at the end of the day, that's the thing that I've enjoyed in my career. It's not just about clever headlines. It's not just about flash, and a Super Bowl spot. Again, all those Super Bowl spots, they're fantastic. There's a moment in time. A lot of research went into them, but there's a whole lot more marketing that goes on behind the scenes. And so that's what B2B is. To me, it's sort of this long haul. But B2B would be nothing without acronyms.
There you go. So
let's segue in there.
I think acronyms are look. I think my 2 cents is it's that jargon, right? You have to be equipped to know enough jargon, and the digital world has opened up so many eyes. Like CPM, CPCs, KPIs, all those things exist for a reason. And if they're having to be put into an acronym, it's because they're being too long and being said too often that they need to be there. So I think while we can joke about acronyms, know the lingo of the space in which you are. If you plan on going B2B with a customer that you don't understand their lingo, you'll be dead in the water dead on arrival immediately, because there's a reason that verbiage and that nomenclature has made its way into their conversation. So I think that's what you're trying to mean here. I want to see where you're going to go with it, but talk about your world, because you've seen acronyms change quite a bit. You've seen them change in their in structure and what some of them mean. Talk a little bit about acronyms, how people use them the wrong way, and how they can affect a marketing cycle.
So I want to talk about exclusion exclusionary versus inclusionary, right? So, people think that anytime jargon is, even the word jargon, right? It's a loaded word. It's sort of a judgy word. Like, you're using jargon, right? It sounds like something that's going to separate me from something else, right?
Yeah.
It's going to confuse me, or I don't understand
Well,
that
in the nature of
jargon.
confusing people, we are going to sign off the radio show right now. We're going to finish this on a podcast because Moira just said confused. So you're listening to the Marketing Madmen on Extra 106.3. Tune over to the podcast to hear the rest of this conversation.
Fantastic. So, the thing about three-letter acronyms is they can be very useful, right? They can be inclusive. And so, when you think about having credibility, which is key in marketing, right? Who's credible? You need to be credible. And so understanding, the acronyms, the language, not just of marketing, because marketing has its own set of them, but all the different vertical markets, right? Every industry, you could have the same acronym and you look at 5 different verticals and it means something different in each. And I think that's something for young people. They're initially intimidated by all these acronyms and they think that it means one thing and they should know what the one thing is. But I think, if you're a curious person, you should be constantly figuring out what these terms mean to people.
I agree. And a quick Google search will find all these things because honestly, there used to be 3 people in the C-suite. There's a CFO, CMO. Now there's CIO. There's all these different C-suite people. So even that in itself. So Moira, this has been awesome. Honestly, congrats again on the award. Congrats again on the career. Thank you for popping in. Make sure to listen to the Marketing Madhouse also on this channel for lots more insights on B2B, some technical stuff, some zany stuff, and some Moira stuff. You listen to the Marketing Madmen. Thank you.